Hi, let's talk about Windows PowerShell. First, I'd like to start off talking about some background material, and then we'll dive in and start doing some hands-on stuff to take you from beginner to, well, at least semi-competent. All right, so first off, what is PowerShell? It's a scripting language that you can use to manage your operating system, not only the native things that are running in it, but also the applications that are running on there as well. So down there at the bottom, I've noted some things that you could do like add or remove programs, check file space, write to the file system, add, remove users, etc. And it runs not only on Windows operating systems, but now it runs on Linux systems as well. One thing you should know as you get started on this is that it does have a steep learning curve. Initially, you feel like you're not learning very much, it's very simplistic, and then you pick up some things really quick and it's hard, and then suddenly you know it. So it has a brief but steep learning curve where you feel like it's hard in the beginning, but then you realize that it's very consistent in how it does everything. And once you kind of get the general pattern for how you do things in PowerShell, then you'll be able to figure out just about anything you want to do with it, even though there's going to be a lot of commands that you still don't know. All right, so what are some of the things that you can do with it that matter? Well, I mentioned some of these already, but you could manage the users on a system, the applications that are running, processes, file systems. You could modify your system configurations, and really just anything that you could do with a GUI on a Windows system, you can do from PowerShell. And this is handy if you have thousands of headless computers that are running in the cloud and you need to run a script that, let's just say, makes a firewall change or adds or removes a program on all of them. You can run a script that does that and goes out to many of them simultaneously and gets the work done for you so that you don't have to log on to each one and use the GUI to administer it. Some of the applications that you might modify in a running Windows server, for example, are SQL Server, VMware, Exchange, and as I noted before, it does run and can be installed on Linux. And so if you're running an application that's a .NET Core application, you could also administer that through PowerShell. So there's a lot of uses to it. Okay, some more background. It was created in 2006, so in some ways it feels similar to Bash if you've ever done things with Linux. But given that Unix systems have been around for many decades, and this is relatively new, they did put a lot of thought into it and build on the good things they learned from the past. As of version 6, which is Core in 2018, it's gone from just running on Windows to being able to be run on Linux systems as well as Windows. All right, so how do I start it? Good question. Let's jump over to Windows and go over to your Start menu, and you will see if you type in PowerShell, there are a couple different options there. One is the PowerShell regular app, which looks like the command prompt in Windows, and then there's PowerShell ISE that looks like an integrated development environment. So let's start off with just this one for simplicity. So it's a blue background version of your command prompt, but we have a lot more commands that are available to us here. All right, so let's go ahead and run some of these commands. So get hyphen child item is one that you can type in. And what that does is give you the directory listing. So this is equivalent to typing in dir or ls. And there's actually a lot of aliases to this, other commands that you could run. So you could do dir, or you could do ls, or you could do gci. They all do the same thing, but under the covers, they all point to this command right here, which is admittedly a little bit bulky, right, because it's long. All right, let's do another one. Get process. So with this, I can see all of the processes that are currently running on my system, and because this system's running a little slow, it's taking a little while for that to actually display. Another one I can do is get time zone. All right, it displays my time zone. And maybe I could do get crazy. Oh, I was just kidding you on that one. But you probably are noticing that there's a pattern here that it begins with get every single time I'm running a command. So what we're doing is running things called commandlets, and commandlets are composed of a verb followed by some noun. And there are a relatively few number of prefixes or verbs that are used in PowerShell, but there are quite a lot of nouns. So once you kind of get the idea that you're either getting or setting things or you're updating things or whatever, you start to guess at what the command might be for something. For example, if I needed to get help, it's like, oh, get hyphen help, and you're probably going to be right. So anytime you think like that, you're probably going to be able to guess the right command for it. But why guess? We could just see them. So let me go over here and I'll type in PowerShell, and this time I'm going to open up ISE. I don't know how yours is going to display when it comes up. I don't see some additional panels here that I would usually have, so I'm going to say View, and I'm going to say Script Pane. So this is where I could type in commands at the top and view things at the bottom. But right now I just want to show you about the commandlets. So if I say View, Show Command Add-on, over here on the right-hand side, you can see a list of commandlets, and you see that these ones start with add, and I go down and I see connect, convert, enable, get, new, remove, set, test, update, write. So there are quite a few commands that can be run in PowerShell, but they're relatively consistent in terms of how they're written. Okay, so let me go back to the other one for now, and let's run some commands. One thing I'd like to let you know right out the gate here is that everything that is displayed in PowerShell is an object. Now, when you're working with another type of scripting language like Bash, in Bash on Linux, you're just passing around text. And because you're passing around objects here in PowerShell, when you see something on the screen, you're really seeing the equivalent of a toString method of that object. All right, so let me go ahead and demonstrate some things related to what I was just saying. So if I say $A, I'm now going to create a variable, and I'm going to say equals 1 plus 1. All right, and if I want to print out the value of A to the screen, I can do $A, and so it makes it look like it's a variable that holds some text of some sort. But I mentioned before that this thing is actually an object, and so let me prove that. You can take pretty much anything, like this, and then pipe it. So I do the pipe character on the right-hand side of your keyboard, and type in get hyphen member. So, all right, so go ahead and hit return, and what you see is it's evaluating that thing that preceded it and says, hey, that's something from the library system of type int32, and here are a bunch of methods that can be applied to it, and here's the names of those methods. All right, so let's do something comparable to this and do, we saw the command earlier, get child item, and we know that gives us our directory. Now let's pipe that to get member. So what we're trying to determine here is what is it that gets returned from get child item. Okay, and I'll just show the last thing here and explain some more later. But what it's saying is, hey, I got something that's in this library, and it's an object of type file info, and it has a bunch of methods and properties, and here are the methods and properties that you could reference. Okay, so if you're following along with me right now, what I would recommend is that you take a break and just pause the video for a second and type in some of the commands that are available here and pipe it to get member so that you can see what are the methods and the properties that are associated with what is returned from that command, which is going to be an object, and all objects are going to have some unique characteristics. So go ahead and pause and look at that for a second. Okay, so if you saw me run this command earlier, you might have noticed that it actually has returned two different things. It's returning something called directory info, so basically folders, and it's returning file info, in essence, files. I said that everything that's returned is of type object, but we got two different objects that are described here by getMember. So what gives here? All right, so let me first off set a variable, and I'll type in get hyphen child item. Okay, and now if I do $A, here are a bunch of file folder entries. I, because of the D, I know that it's a folder or a directory, and the other ones are actual files. All right, so we're able to print it back out to the screen, and we can do what I did before, which is pipe this to get member, and we can see that these things that are being displayed are either of type file info or directory info. But the story is a little bit more nuanced than that. What we're actually returning, and what I've returned into my variable A, is an array or a collection of objects. And I can actually see how many objects I have. A.count. So remember, everything's an object, and because it's an object, I can do this dot approach to see methods or properties associated with an object. So A.count shows that there are, or at least for me, there are 38 items that are now returned in part of a collection. And I can actually reference them one by doing something like A bracket 0. So treating this as an array, I can see that for me, the first folder item is something called Anaconda. And if I kind of go near the end, which is going to be a file, I see that this is it lists off just that particular item, which is temp.csv. Okay, so if I, instead of accessing the entire collection of things, just access a single thing and pipe it to get member, I will be able to identify that single item as what it is. Get member. All right, so that seems a little bit more rational, that whatever my Anaconda folder thing is, that it's a folder and these are all the properties and methods associated with it. And then similarly, if I go to that thing that I know is a file specifically out of that collection, I can also get its attributes. All right. Okay, so we just introduced the idea of arrays or collections, and so another way I could do this is I could reset my collection and just go A equals 1, 2, 3, 4, and you might experiment then with accessing one of those. And the way that you would do that is you do something like A and then 2, and you can see something that's in the 0, 1, 2 position, which is item number 3. Okay, so next challenge. We've been doing get child item, and it keeps showing the contents of my current directory. But what if I wanted to find something that is in a different directory? Can get child item be passed a parameter and show me a different directory? And the answer is yes. So I would like you to take a second to figure out how to do that. How would you go about that if you wanted to know how to pass additional items to a commandlet that exists in PowerShell? Well, one of the things you might do is you might go out to Google, and that's one way you can do it. But another thing you can do is there's a really healthy built-in help system, and you can type in get help and then name any commandment. So commandlet. So get child item is the thing I want to know more about. And if I hit return, then it shows me lots of good stuff. And so here it's explaining what I can pass or what I can do with the get child item command. And some of these things, like where it says like a hyphen, is you're naming a parameter and then you have to pass some value with it. And some of these things can be standalone, meaning you just provide a hyphen saying I just want my output to be read-only, or I want the search to operate recursively. So some of these things are an on-off switch for the output, and some of these things are used in combination where you name some parameter and then you do some additional value that's going to change the output in some way. It's maybe not inherently obvious how to look into different folders at this point. One of the things you could do is follow this little help item right here. It says get-help, get child item, which is what we just ran, but use it with hyphen examples. And for most of your commandlets, you're going to have this option available to you. So let me go ahead and do that. Now let me before I do that, I'm going to mention something. If you are logged in as an administrator, then you should be able to run the update-help command, and I recommend that you do that to pull down all the documentation related to PowerShell to your local machine, because it might not be there initially. So once all the documentation is downloaded to your machine, you can do, and by the way, this is not case sensitive. This stuff, generally speaking, is not case sensitive when you're using PowerShell. So I'm going to say, get me some examples, and a whole bunch of stuff scrolls by. I happen to know, because I've done this a few times, that there are 7 different examples here. So if I scroll up far enough, eventually I will see the first example. And the first example, it says, well that one just says, oh, get child item, specify the path, C drive /test. So that is how you could specify a different directory than the one you're in currently. So let's just go ahead and play with that. Maybe I want to do C drive /Windows. So I could do get child item hyphen path C drive /Windows. And it does exactly what I would hope that it would do. Okay, that's enough for the first video. So let me go ahead and stop here, and then we'll continue on in the next video.